story is called Hot Foot. Being a high school student in a small town leaves you with very few options for fun. Sure, there's sports games to attend and friends' houses to go hang out at, but when you feel like being a delinquent and want to do some underage drinking, there's nowhere private to go. However, a friend's family owned a multi-acre piece of land and we decided to make that our party spot. One night, a couple dozen friends and I went to the field. We hung out for several hours, talking and drinking, and as the night grew later, the group dwindled down until there were only 4 of us. I had driven my friends and I, so I was the only one with a vehicle, and I was definitely not sober enough to drive home yet. So I decided to wait until the alcohol had diminished within my system. One friend, Tommy, asked if he could drive my car around the field, as he wanted to do donuts in the dewy grass. I agreed, and he and his girlfriend went to the car, proceeded to drive it around. I stayed with my friend Scott, and we talked and laughed at Tommy's spectacular vehicular acrobatics. After about 15 minutes of driving my car around, I waved Tommy over to tell him that was enough for tonight. He pulled up next to us and revved the engine. I told him to get out of the car as I thought the car had had enough abuse for the evening. He disagreed. I began to get angry, and to prevent him from driving away again, I sat on the hood of the car. In hindsight, I'm not sure if Tommy hated me or thought I had a death wish, but as soon as I sat on the hood, Tommy accelerated, and he kept accelerating. All I could do was try to center myself and keep my balance. He drove nearly 100 feet at about 35 miles an hour. Then he stomped on the brakes. I fell, and an exquisite burst of pain radiated through my body as my chest and face hit the ground. Unfortunately, the dew on the grass made it impossible for the car to come to an immediate stop, and with my legs folded at the knees, the car slid over the top of me. Pinned in place between the 2 front tires and in a state of shock, I looked out into the field, illuminated by my car's headlights. Dust and dirt were in the air. I could hear Tommy's girlfriend screaming from inside the car, and it was then that I realized I was trapped. I began to panic and started yelling for Tommy to back the car off of me. I was terrified that in his confusion he would continue to drive over me, but he was able to reverse and I was free to move again. I stood up and immediately collapsed. I was put into the back seat of my car, and Scott drove us all out of the field. I awoke in the morning on Scott's living room couch with a massive headache, without even a slight recollection of the incident from the night before. I walked to the bathroom, and I was horrified by my face in the mirror. My face was cut up from sliding across the harsh field, pieces of grass and gravel stuck in the cuts. I cleaned my face as best as I could, and began to exit the bathroom. Then I looked down at my feet. Something was stuck to my left foot. Upon closer examination, I realized it was the biggest blister I had ever seen. I was terrified. I immediately lanced the blister with a safety pin and poured hydrogen peroxide on it. The pain was intense. I couldn't figure out how my foot had been burned. I looked at the shoe I was wearing at the time of the accident. Corresponding with the burn on my foot, the shoe had a very slight melted spot on it. When my foot was pressed against the engine, it had been burned, but my intoxication had prevented me from feeling the pain. I gathered my things and left the house. When I arrived home, I made up a quick story about how I had been on a dirt bike the night before and had fallen and cut up my face. I showed no one the burn on my foot. Despite my attempts at treating it, the burn never healed on its own, and I was left with a large, open, and incredibly painful sore. In fact, several months of excruciating pain went by until I told my dad about the burn. We went to the doctor, and I was told it was a 2nd-degree burn, and it would require a skin graft to have any chance of healing. I ended up having to stay in the hospital for several weeks in order for the graft to take hold and heal. Shortly after, my dad wanted to know whose dirt bike I had been riding when I had the accident. My story began to crack, and I couldn't continue it any longer. I had to tell the truth, and I felt absolutely awful for lying. Now when I look at the scar on my foot, it brings to mind the stupid mistakes young people make. If I had just been honest with my father about what had happened, I wouldn't have had to go through all those months in pain and fear, and in addition, destroying my father's trust in me. In the end, this accident and the months that followed made me a more careful and ultimately more honest